Undertale is a viral indie role-playing game created by developer Toby Fox and was released in 2015. Undertale takes place in a world where humans live on the surface and monsters live underground after conflict between the two groups. We're introduced to the main character in the beginning sequence, a gender-ambiguous child who falls into the realm of monsters and has to journey their way back to the surface. Undertale seems like a basic, unassuming game on the surface about returning home, but playing the game unravels multiple layers about the history and depth of the gaming universe. With such a dense amount of lore, many interpretations of the game have sprung about, leading many to question the true meaning of Undertale. One of Undertale's driving points is that it's a friendly role-playing game where nobody has to die, shown in its Steam trailer. In the game, when the player fights monsters, generally they have two choices to end the fight: to kill the monster or to end the fight by offering the monster mercy. There is simply no other option. The game doesn't allow for so. Once you enter a fight, you must end it one way or another, and Toby Fox explicitly designed the game to be so. This game design choice is contradictory to most games nowadays, where the only way forward is to eventually eliminate most, if not all, enemies, and presents an interesting dynamic to the gaming experience. The player's progression ultimately depends on the morality. Will the player simply eliminate all enemies in their path, instead choose to spare them all, or maybe a mix of both? The player has the autonomy to slay or spare which monsters they please, letting the story progress depending on the player's moral choices. Ultimately, since combat is an essential part of the game, morality does play a big role in the progression of the game, leaving it to be a strong contender for what Undertale represents. This is shown when Sands reveals that EXP stands for quote-unquote execution points instead of, presumably, experience points, and love stands for quote-unquote level of violence, allowing a quantitative view of the player's morality. I had a high value of EXP and love, showing that I slayed a lot more than I probably should have. Being a main statistic for the player, it demonstrates that morality is ultimately embedded into the game. This idea of morality is further shown in the neutral ending, where the player has to decide whether to kill or spare ASGORE upon defeating him. The player's morality comes into play about whether to kill or spare. This decision must be made one way or another. You simply cannot complete Undertale without making a decision eventually. Do you kill or do you save? Undertale teaches you that your actions have consequences. Oftentimes in video games, people feel liberated from their actions because, quote-unquote, it's just a game. In Minecraft, for example, the player has to slay enemies in order to progress through the game, which are presented as obstacles rather than characters you should empathize with. Undertale has its fair share of enemies presented in the same manner, but also presents you with the main cast of characters, many of whom you eventually have to fight, even after getting to know each character dearly. The first true example of this is the Toriel fight, where you have to fight her in order to progress through the underground. Upon my first playthrough, I killed Toriel after multiple attempts of mercy, only for this sequence of events to happen. This is the moment that I learned that in Undertale, my actions will have consequences further in the game. I cannot call Toriel anymore, nor can I have the possibility of seeing her later in the game. Even in later parts of the game, certain dialogue reminded me of my past actions, mainly my slaying of certain important characters in the game, such as Lesser Dog and Undyne, both of whom I killed. In addition, the ending references Sans interacting with Toriel to knock-knock jokes, as well as alluding to Toriel being ASGORE's wife, only burdened by the fact that in my playthrough, I killed Toriel, leaving their hopes to be shattered. This wasn't helped by the fact that to reach the ending, I had to venture through Toriel's original house, only reminding me of my prior actions. Undertale takes an emotional turn on the player's actions, constantly reminding them of any misdeeds they have committed in the past. This interpretation of Undertale is ultimately connected with the morality argument, but analyzes a different aspect of morality. Rather than specifically focusing on killing or giving mercy, we instead focus on the consequences of killing or giving mercy and how that affects other characters' perceptions of you later in the game. These interactions help teach the character to think twice about combat with other characters, as killing or sparing could cause certain events to occur later in the game. The fact that Undertale supports multiple endings through complete slaying or mercy shows that your actions do have an impact on the story. Given that this is an extension of the morality argument, it is a strong argument for the interpretation of Undertale, albeit a different perspective of it. The story of Undertale's fun or all odds seems stacked against the main character. Given that the main character is a child, the fact that they can fight against monsters in the first place is astonishing. In addition, the ability to remain victorious against main characters who have years of fighting experience teaches the player a lesson about perseverance despite obvious gaps in skill level. This child is also able to navigate the underground autonomously with little experience as well, not because they want to but because they have to in order to get out of the underground. To support this theory further, at checkpoints throughout the game constantly reminds the player to not give up, as they are always full of determination despite the dangerous situation they are placed in. In addition, during certain boss fights such as the Photoshop Flowey boss fight, all hope seems lost as Flowey slays the player multiple times. Only if the player relaunches the game and returns to the boss fight is when they learn that slaying Flowey is possible, staying determined through very difficult and unlikely circumstances. This is not a strong interpretation of Undertale. However, one could argue that morality and consequences are a stronger argument since they are the base mechanics for progression throughout the game, since you cannot be victorious in fights without killing or giving/being offered mercy. As stated already, you cannot complete Undertale without deciding eventually to spare or kill. However, in a normal playthrough, progression cannot also be made without reaching checkpoints, reminding the player about staying determined. In fact, the only way to complete the Photoshop Flowey boss fight is to persevere and keep going, showing that determination is needed. Both of these examples show that morality and determination are strong arguments that simply analyze different gameplay components. The presentation of monsters in Undertale is inherently biased whether intentionally or not. Introducing the occupants of the underworld as monsters creates a precedent that they're evil, as the word monster implies evil intentions. Undertale flips this idea on its head though, where in the introductory sequence, we're introduced to Flowey, a seemingly friendly flower who backstabs the player. Surprisingly, a monster who we learn to be Toriel saves the player. It's interesting here how Toby Fox chose a flower, a symbol of peace, friendship, and love, as the first villain we encounter, while Toriel, an anthropomorphic goat, is the one that saves the player and even offers the player hospitality later in the game. Through this, Undertale teaches us to judge others based on their morals, empathy, and personality rather than their outward appearance. As we encounter later characters in the game, we learn that some of the kindest characters are often the ones we least expect to be. Through this, Undertale teaches us to deconstruct stereotypes about the characters and ultimately the people we encounter every day. Despite this being a very strong argument for the meaning of Undertale, this is less of a gameplay dynamic and more of a design choice for the game. Compared to the obvious gripe of morality through killing/mercy, and a constant reminder of determination present in gameplay, this is simply an analysis of the symbolism of the characters, where at times there arguably might not be any explicit messaging. Whether Toby Fox intended for this to be the case or not, it is hard to deny the juxtaposition of main characters such as Flowey and Toriel, where their appearances do not align with their intentions. I'm going to take a detour from the central, more obvious theories and propose one that is a bit unique. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, quote, "It's not the destination, it's the journey," end quote, showing a notion of finding value in the process rather than the end result. This quote definitely applies to the whole concept of Undertale. Though the central goal, our destination, is to escape the underground, it's important to regard the friends and family the main character has made during their journey in the underground. Characters like Toriel showed the player hospitality and care despite barely knowing them, while Sanity Papyrus chose not to immediately take the player to the capital, choosing to befriend the player instead. Alphys constantly helped the player through the hot zone in times of need, especially against certain battles in Metadon and places where going forward would be impossible without outside assistance. Characters in Snowden allowed the user to stay at the hotel without paying, and allowed the main characters in the game showed hospitality despite humans being the reason they are there in the underground in the first place. Though at the end of the game, the player eventually does reach their destination, the contribution of other characters and the relationship to them cannot be understated. Without these characters interacting with the main player, Undertale will not be the same game. In fact, in my ending of the game, Sans and Papyrus gave me a call detailing the state of the underground after my departure, showing their care and consideration after the fact. Despite this being a very strong argument for the meaning of Undertale, compared to the general morality and determination arguments however, this argument falters due to the fact that it is more of an analysis of the narrative rather than the explicit message given to the player. Similar to the argument about deconstructing character stereotypes, this is simply an extension of the analysis of the main characters and their relationship to the user, just through different contexts. Instead of analyzing the symbolism of the characters, we're analyzing their relationship to the user throughout the whole game. However, it's hard to deny that Toby Fox created these characters to be humorous, relatable, and an essential part of telling the main story. I still remember characters like Metaton, who put me through various torture games against a fast-paced clock, or Alphys's constant anxiety about chatting with me. Of course, the main goal of the game is to still get out of the underground. You cannot officially beat the game to my knowledge without doing so in some manner, but it would be unwise to disregard the entire process of getting to that point. Ultimately, I feel that all 5 of these theories work together to create Undertale. All of these theories have strong points that analyze aspects of Undertale from multiple perspectives. For example, simply stating that morality is the sole meaning of Undertale would feel wrong, as that aspect fails to consider the narrative and characters that other theories address well. You cannot beat Undertale without questioning your morality, but you also cannot beat Undertale without interacting with characters, staying determined, facing consequences, and appreciating the friends and family you've made along the way. Undertale has so many layers of depth, shown in its vast number of endings and character interactions that I feel that not one sole theory can truly grasp the entire meaning of the game. Undertale's narrative provides a creative playground for theory development, as the dense story allows for different interpretations of the game to spring about. Undertale is truly a unique title, and the fact that Toby Fox, an indie developer, was able to create such a captivating game is astonishing, remaining a stellar example for indie developers for years to come.